Boy with black eye begged bikers be my dad. 32 Hells Angels showed up at school. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain had just started to fall over Cedar Ridge when Noah Bennett pushed open the heavy glass door of Iron Horse Auto Repair. The bell above it gave a tired ring, barely heard over the low rumble of a Harley-Davidson engine being tuned inside the garage bay. Noah was 9 years old, small for his age, wearing a faded blue hoodie that hung past his wrists. One side of his face was swollen, a dark purple bruise spreading beneath his right eye like a storm cloud that had nowhere else to go. He stood there for a moment, water dripping from his sneakers onto the oil-stained concrete floor, staring at the massive man bent over an engine block. Marcus Steele Callahan did not look up right away. At 6 feet 4 inches tall and built like a linebacker, he filled the space around him. His leather vest bore the unmistakable patch of the Hells Angels across his broad shoulders. Tattoos wrapped around his forearms like barbed wire, and grease marked his knuckles from years of turning wrenches and surviving fights he rarely talked about. Most adults crossed the street when they saw him. Most children hid behind their parents. But Noah did not leave. He took 3 slow steps forward until he stood just a few feet away from Marcus. The boy's voice trembled, but it did not break. He asked a question that did not belong in a repair shop filled with chrome and gasoline. Do bikers protect their kids? Marcus froze. The wrench in his hand stopped turning. He lifted his head slowly, dark eyes locking onto the bruise before he even registered the fear behind it. There was no anger in the boy's expression, only exhaustion, only the kind of quiet desperation that should never live inside a 9-year-old child. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and crouched down, lowering himself until they were eye to eye. He kept his voice calm, steady, the way he used to speak to frightened civilians overseas during his military service years ago. What happened to your face, son? Noah swallowed hard. He glanced back at the door as if expecting someone to burst in and drag him away. Then he looked straight at Marcus and whispered the words that would change everything. If you were my dad, he could not hurt me anymore. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the tin roof like distant thunder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, something old and buried. He had spent decades building walls around his heart, convincing himself that family was weakness and attachment was liability. But the child standing in front of him was not asking for money. He was not asking for revenge. He was asking for protection. And in that moment, the roar of motorcycles, the weight of the patch on Marcus's back, and the reputation that made grown men nervous suddenly meant something different. They were not symbols of fear. They were armor. And armor was meant to shield the innocent. Marcus did not answer right away. He studied the boy's face the way a mechanic studies a cracked engine block, looking past the surface damage to understand what caused it. The bruise beneath Noah's eye was deep purple with yellow edges, not fresh from a playground scuffle. It had settled in. The skin along his cheekbone showed faint fingerprints, barely visible unless someone knew what to look for. Marcus knew. He had seen that pattern before, years ago, in places where people learned to survive by staying silent. He stood slowly and walked to the small refrigerator in the corner of the garage office. The hum of the old unit filled the quiet space between them. He grabbed a clean shop towel and wrapped it around a cold bottle of water, then returned and handed it to Noah. Hold this against your eye, he said gently. Not too hard. The boy obeyed without question. His hands were small, trembling slightly as he pressed the cold bundle to his face. Marcus noticed the way Noah flinched when a truck passed outside, the way his shoulders tightened at sudden noise. Those were not the reactions of a child who felt safe at home. Who hurt you? Marcus asked, keeping his voice low and steady. Noah stared at the concrete floor. He traced one sneaker over an oil stain shaped like a map of some distant country. He did not answer directly. Instead he said, "He gets mad when I talk too much." The words were simple. Too simple. Marcus felt heat rise in his chest, but he kept his expression calm. Getting mad is not the same as hurting someone, he said carefully. Noah swallowed. He looked up then, eyes glassy but not crying. He says I make him look weak. He says I need to learn respect. The rain hammered harder against the metal roof. Marcus glanced toward the office window and saw a dark sedan parked across the street. It could have belonged to anyone. In a town the size of Cedar Ridge, people noticed everything. He turned back to Noah. Does your mother know about this? Noah hesitated for several seconds. She works late at the hospital, he said finally. She tells me to stay in my room if he has a bad day. The statement landed heavy. Marcus leaned back against the workbench, folding his arms across his chest. Every instinct trained into him by years with the club said stay out of domestic situations. Those problems were messy. They brought police, courtrooms, headlines. But another voice, older and harder to ignore, reminded him of a different garage long ago, when he had been a boy pretending not to hear arguments through thin apartment walls. He looked at Noah again. Why come here? Why not tell a teacher? Noah pressed the cold towel tighter against his cheek. Because nobody is scared of teachers, he whispered. But they are scared of you. The honesty in that answer hit Marcus harder than any punch he had taken in a bar fight. Fear. The very thing he had worn like armor his entire adult life. To this child, it was hope. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Marcus stepped toward the open garage bay and watched rain pour into the gutter. He could walk back inside, tell the boy to call social services, and wash his hands of it. Or he could step into something bigger than himself. He turned back toward Noah, who stood there small and soaked and waiting. Tomorrow is a school day, right? Marcus asked. Noah nodded. Yes, sir. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. Then tomorrow, he said slowly, you are not walking into that building alone. The words hung in the air between them, steady and deliberate. Tomorrow you are not walking into that building alone. Noah lowered the towel from his eye, confusion mixing with a fragile flicker of hope. He searched Marcus's face as if trying to decide whether this was a promise or just something adults said to make children feel better. You mean you are coming? He asked quietly. Marcus nodded once. I will be there. The answer was simple, but inside his chest, a storm was building. He had crossed lines before in his life, lines drawn by rival clubs and men who thought power meant fear. This was different. This was stepping into a child's world, into hallways filled with lockers and bulletin boards and teachers who would not know what to make of a 6'4" biker standing at the entrance. He glanced at the wall clock above the office door. It was almost 6 in the evening. School would start at 8:30 the next morning. Less than 15 hours from now. Where do you live? Marcus asked. Noah hesitated again, then gave him the street name. It was only 3 miles from the shop, in a row of modest 2-bedroom houses built in the late 1970s. Marcus knew the neighborhood. Small yards, narrow driveways, front porches with sagging steps. He crouched back down so they were eye level once more. Listen to me carefully, he said, keeping his tone firm but calm. Tonight you go home. You stay in your room like your mother tells you. If anything feels wrong, you call this number. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card from the shop. On the back, he wrote his personal cell phone number in thick black ink and handed it over. Noah held it like it was something fragile and rare. What if he gets mad that I left? The boy whispered. Marcus met his gaze without blinking. Then he gets mad at me instead. The statement was not a threat. It was a transfer of weight. A shifting of fear from a 9-year-old child to a grown man who had spent decades carrying heavier burdens. Outside, the rain began to slow, turning into a soft drizzle. The dark sedan across the street started its engine and drove away, tires hissing on wet pavement. Marcus memorized the license plate without appearing to look directly at it. Old habits never truly disappeared. He stood and walked Noah to the front door of the shop. The sky was a deep gray, the air smelling of wet asphalt and gasoline. You got someone picking you up? Marcus asked. Noah nodded. My mom thinks I am at the library. She gets off at 7. Marcus felt a tightness in his jaw, but did not comment. Instead, he opened the door and rested one large hand on the boy's shoulder. Careful, steady. Tomorrow morning, be ready at 8:15, he said. I will meet you at the corner of Maple and 3rd. Noah looked up at him again, searching for doubt, for hesitation. He did not find any. For the first time since he had walked into that garage, the boy's shoulders lowered slightly. Not relaxed, but lighter. As Noah stepped back into the damp evening air, Marcus watched him walk down the sidewalk, small against the fading light. When the boy turned the corner and disappeared from sight, Marcus closed the shop door and leaned his forehead briefly against the cool glass. He knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he was going to show up at that school, he was not going alone. The shop felt smaller after Noah left, as if the walls themselves understood that something larger than an engine rebuild had just begun. Marcus stood in the quiet garage for several long seconds, listening to the faint drip of rain from the metal awning outside. Then he straightened his shoulders and reached for his phone. He did not scroll through social media. He did not hesitate. He opened the private group thread used only for serious matters, the kind that did not involve weekend rides or charity events. His thumbs moved slowly across the screen. Tomorrow morning. Cedar Ridge Elementary. 8:30 sharp. I need presence, not noise. 31 of you. No trouble. Just stand. The message was short, clear. Within seconds, the replies began appearing. A simple word repeated again and again. There. Marcus exhaled through his nose. He had not asked them to fight. He had not asked them to intimidate. He had asked them to show up. And in the Brotherhood, showing up meant everything. He walked back to the garage bay and shut off the overhead lights, leaving only the small lamp in the office glowing against the dark. For a moment, he caught his reflection in the window. Broad shoulders, weathered face, the patch stitched across his back like a second skin. He remembered being 9 years old himself, sitting at the edge of a narrow bed in a one-bedroom apartment in Tulsa, Oklahoma, listening to his father slam doors after another long night at the bar. He remembered promising himself that if he ever grew strong enough, no child around him would feel that small again. Strength had come, money had come, respect had come, but he had never used it this way. The next morning arrived cold and gray. A thin layer of mist clung to the streets as Marcus rolled his Harley-Davidson out of the shop. The engine rumbled to life, deep and steady, echoing off the brick storefronts lining Main Street. One by one, other motorcycles joined him from side streets and parking lots. Chrome flashed beneath the streetlights. Leather vests bore the same emblem across broad backs. No one revved their engines aggressively. No one shouted. They rode in disciplined silence, 32 machines moving like a single thought through the quiet town. At exactly 8:15, Marcus pulled up to the corner of Maple and 3rd. Noah was already there, backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. The bruise beneath his eye had darkened overnight, but he stood straighter than he had the day before. When he heard the rumble approaching, his head snapped up. The sight that greeted him was something out of a movie scene. A long line of motorcycles stretching down the block, headlights cutting through the morning haze. Neighbors peeked through curtains. A delivery driver slowed to stare. Marcus eased his bike to the curb and removed his helmet. For a brief second, Noah looked overwhelmed. 31 other men climbed off their motorcycles behind Marcus, forming a loose line along the sidewalk. They did not block traffic. They did not speak loudly. They simply stood, large, steady, present. Marcus walked over and knelt in front of Noah once more. "You ready?" he asked softly. Noah's eyes moved from one biker to the next, taking in the tattoos, the worn leather, the sheer size of them. He swallowed hard. "Are they all coming because of me?" he asked. Marcus gave a small nod. "Because nobody walks alone when they ask for help." Noah tightened the straps on his backpack. For the first time, there was no tremor in his hands. As they turned toward the school entrance 3 blocks away, the low rumble of 32 engines started again, not as a threat, but as a shield. And inside the elementary school, people were already beginning to notice. The procession moved slowly down the final block towards Cedar Ridge Elementary, engines idling low like distant thunder rolling across open plains. Parents standing near the crosswalk paused mid-conversation. A few children tugged at their mother's sleeves, eyes wide at the line of leather-clad men walking in disciplined silence. There was no shouting, no aggressive revving, no raised fists. Just boots against pavement and the steady presence of 32 men who had decided that a 9-year-old boy mattered. At the front entrance, Principal Howard Grant stepped outside, adjusting his tie as he surveyed the scene. He was a tall man in his early 50s with graying hair and the careful posture of someone used to maintaining order. His eyes moved from the motorcycles parked along the curb to Marcus, who walked at Noah's side. For a brief moment, tension flickered across the principal's face. Marcus saw it and lifted one open hand in a calm gesture. "Good morning, sir," Marcus called out in an even tone. "We are not here to cause trouble." Principal Grant descended the steps, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete. "This is a school," he said carefully. "I can see that," Marcus replied. "We are here to make sure a student feels safe walking inside. Nothing more." The principal's gaze shifted to Noah. He noticed the bruise immediately, the discoloration that makeup could not hide, and that playground accidents rarely explained. His expression softened. "Noah, do you want to come inside with me?" he asked gently. Noah hesitated. For a split second, the old fear returned to his posture. He looked up at Marcus instead of answering. Marcus crouched down again, keeping his voice low so only the boy could hear. "We are staying right here," he said. "Every one of us. You walk in that door knowing we are not leaving until that bell rings." Noah glanced over his shoulder at the line of bikers standing along the sidewalk. Some had folded arms. Others rested hands loosely at their sides. A few offered small nods of encouragement. None looked impatient. None looked amused. They looked protective. That was enough. Noah turned back to Principal Grant and gave a small nod. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. As they began walking toward the entrance, the heavy glass doors opened from inside. A school counselor, Mrs. Alvarez, stepped out, her eyes wide at the sight of the motorcycles lining the street. She leaned down to Noah's level, her voice gentle but serious. "Noah, sweetheart, are you all right?" He glanced back one more time. Marcus stood tall behind him, shoulders squared, eyes scanning the area with calm vigilance. "I am now," Noah answered. Inside the hallway, whispers had already begun. Students peered from classroom doors. Teachers paused mid-sentence. Word traveled fast in small towns, and the image of 32 Hells Angels outside an elementary school would not stay quiet for long. At the far end of the corridor, another figure appeared. A broad-shouldered man in a pressed uniform jacket, walking with the authority of someone who believed the building belonged to him. Noah's steps faltered. His fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack. Marcus, watching through the glass doors, followed the boy's line of sight and saw the man approaching. Even from outside, he could sense the shift in Noah's breathing. The storm was not over. It had just stepped into the hallway. Noah stopped walking. The man at the end of the hallway was not a stranger. Darren Cole stood nearly 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a county sheriff department jacket over plain clothes. His badge clipped to his belt caught the fluorescent lights as he moved forward with controlled, deliberate steps. To most people in Cedar Ridge, Darren represented authority, stability, law and order. To Noah, he represented something else entirely. Mrs. Alvarez felt the shift immediately. She placed a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. "Is that your stepfather?" she asked softly. Noah did not answer. His breathing had gone shallow, the way it had the afternoon before in the garage. His eyes fixed on Darren, not with defiance, but with careful calculation. Darren's gaze swept down the hallway, taking in the whispers, the tension, the way teachers lingered near classroom doors. Then his eyes landed on Noah. His jaw tightened slightly. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice even but edged with irritation. Principal Grant stepped forward, positioning himself between Darren and the child without making it obvious. "Good morning, Darren," he said calmly. "We are just ensuring all our students feel safe this morning." Darren's eyes flicked toward the front entrance where silhouettes of leather vests were visible through the glass doors. He gave a short, humorless exhale. "Safe from what, exactly?" "From whoever thinks a child deserves that," Mrs. Alvarez said quietly, nodding toward Noah's bruise. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Darren's expression did not change, but something colder entered his eyes. "Kid's roughhouse," he replied. "He plays sports. Accidents happen." Noah's fingers tightened around his backpack strap. Mrs. Alvarez felt it. Principal Grant felt it. And outside, through the glass, Marcus felt it too. He could not hear the words being spoken, but he could read posture the way some men read road signs. He saw Noah's shoulders curl inward. He saw Darren's stance widen just slightly, claiming space. Marcus took one step closer to the doors, not entering, not crossing the line. Just close enough that Darren's peripheral vision would register him. Darren noticed. His eyes shifted toward the tall biker standing on the other side of the glass. For a long second, the two men locked gazes. No threats were exchanged. No gestures were made. But something passed between them. A recognition. One man used authority as armor. The other used presence. Principal Grant cleared his throat gently. "Darren, perhaps we should step into my office and discuss this like adults." Darren looked back at Noah. "You coming home after school?" he asked in a tone that sounded casual to anyone not listening carefully. Noah hesitated again. Then, for the first time, he did something small but powerful. He glanced over his shoulder toward the glass doors and saw Marcus still standing there. Not moving. Not leaving. The entire line of bikers remained on the sidewalk, steady as fence posts in a storm. Noah turned back to Darren and answered in a voice that trembled only slightly. "I am staying for tutoring today." It was not a lie. Mrs. Alvarez nodded immediately. "Yes, he is." Darren studied the adults around him. The principal, the counselor, the silent line of men outside, the hallway full of witnesses. He forced a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "Fine," he said. "I will pick him up later." As he turned and walked back down the corridor, the tension did not disappear. It shifted, because for the first time, Darren Cole understood that whatever had been hidden inside those house walls was no longer invisible. The hallway slowly returned to motion after Darren disappeared around the corner, but the air still felt charged, like the atmosphere after lightning strikes too close to home. Mrs. Alvarez guided Noah gently toward her office, her hand resting lightly at the center of his back. Principal Grant lingered for a moment near the entrance, then gave Marcus a brief nod through the glass before stepping inside as well. Outside, the line of bikers remained exactly where they had positioned themselves. No one checked a phone. No one shifted impatiently. They stood like sentinels, boots planted firmly on the concrete, eyes alert but calm. Marcus kept his gaze on the hallway doors, watching for any sudden movement. Inside the small counseling office, sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, striping the carpet in pale gold. Noah sat in a cushioned chair across from Mrs. Alvarez, his backpack still clutched tightly in his lap. Principal Grant closed the door quietly behind them, lowering his voice as he took a seat. "Noah, I need you to tell us honestly," he said gently. "Has anyone been hurting you at home?" The question was careful, not accusatory, not leading. Noah stared at his shoes. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. After several long seconds, he spoke. "He does not always mean to," he said quietly. "When he is mad, he grabs too hard. Sometimes he pushes." Mrs. Alvarez felt her chest tighten, but she kept her tone steady. "Has he ever threatened you?" Noah nodded once. "He says nobody will believe me because he wears the badge." Principal Grant exchanged a look with the counselor. That sentence carried weight far beyond a playground argument. Mrs. Alvarez leaned forward slightly. "Noah, what happened last night?" Noah hesitated, then said, "He saw the ice pack on my face. I told him I ran into a door. He told me next time I should not miss." The words were delivered flat, as if he had practiced, saying them without emotion. Mrs. Alvarez inhaled slowly. "Thank you for telling us," she said softly. "You did the right thing." Outside, a patrol vehicle rolled slowly past the line of motorcycles. The deputy inside glanced at the assembled bikers, but did not stop. Cedar Ridge was not a town that saw large gatherings without reason, yet no one was revving engines or blocking traffic. They were simply there. Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. A text message from one of his brothers read, "Word is the sheriff is aware." Marcus typed back a single sentence. "Let him be aware. Presence is not a crime." He slipped the phone away and returned his focus to the school entrance. Inside the counseling office, Principal Grant stood. "I am required by law to report suspected abuse," he said carefully. "That means Child Protective Services will be notified today." Noah's head snapped up, panic flashing across his face. "Will he go to jail?" he whispered. Mrs. Alvarez shook her head gently. "This is not about punishment. It is about safety. About making sure you are protected." Protected. The word echoed in Noah's mind. He thought about the 32 motorcycles outside. About the way Marcus had knelt down and spoken to him like he mattered. For the first time, the fear inside his chest did not feel endless. It felt challenged. Principal Grant opened the office door. Mrs. Alvarez stepped out to make the required call. And through the glass of the front entrance, Marcus saw her lift a phone to her ear. The line had been drawn. Not with fists. Not with threats. But with witnesses. Mrs. Alvarez returned to the counseling office with a measured expression, her movements calm but purposeful. She closed the door gently behind her and sat across from Noah again, folding her hands in her lap so her voice would not tremble. "Child Protective Services will be here this afternoon," she said softly. "They're going to ask some questions, and your mother will be contacted as well. Noah felt his stomach tighten. The word mother carried warmth and fear at the same time. She worked double shifts at Cedar Ridge Medical Center, leaving before sunrise some mornings and returning long after dinner. She loved him. He knew that. But she also avoided conflict the way some people avoided storms, hoping if she stayed quiet long enough the thunder would pass. Is she going to be mad? Noah asked. Mrs. Alvarez shook her head. She is going to want to know the truth. And she deserves to hear it. Outside, the morning bell rang, echoing through the hallways. Students hurried to class, whispering about the motorcycles parked along the curb. Teachers maintained order, but their eyes drifted toward the windows every few minutes. Word had spread faster than anyone expected. 32 Hells Angels standing in front of Cedar Ridge Elementary was not something the town had ever witnessed. Marcus remained near the entrance, arms folded loosely across his chest. He could feel the shift in energy around the building. Parents who had lingered earlier were now speaking in low voices near their vehicles. A second patrol car drove slowly past, then parked half a block away. No sirens. No lights. Just observation. One of the bikers stepped closer to Marcus and spoke quietly. You think this turns into something bigger? Marcus kept his gaze on the school doors. It already is bigger, he replied. It just is not loud. Inside the counseling office, Noah shifted in his seat. The fear that had once filled his chest like heavy smoke felt different now. It was still there, but it was no longer suffocating him. When Mrs. Alvarez asked if he would feel comfortable returning to class until Child Protective Services arrived, he hesitated, then nodded slowly. I can try, he said. Principal Grant walked him to his classroom personally. As they moved down the hallway, other students stared, some curious, some impressed, some confused. Noah kept his eyes forward. For once, he did not feel invisible. He knew what waited outside those glass doors. When he entered his classroom, his teacher paused mid-lesson and offered him a warm, steady smile. Take your seat, Noah, she said gently. We are glad you are here. He sat down and placed his backpack beside his desk. Through the classroom window, he could see a portion of the parking lot. The motorcycles lined the curb like a silent barricade, chrome catching the gray morning light. Marcus stood near the front, tall and unmovable. Their eyes did not meet through the distance and the glass, but Noah knew he was there. The hours until lunch felt longer than usual. Every creak of the hallway made his heart jump. Yet, each time he glanced outside, the line of leather vests remained. They had not left. They had not grown impatient. They were steady. And in that steadiness, something inside Noah began to change. For the first time in a long while, he believed that what happened inside his house did not have to stay hidden forever. By early afternoon the sky had cleared, leaving a pale blue stretch above Cedar Ridge Elementary, but the tension around the building had not faded. Inside the classroom, Noah tried to focus on a math worksheet about long division, yet every few minutes his eyes drifted toward the window. The motorcycles were still there. 32 of them, lined with quiet precision along the curb. Some of the bikers now leaned casually against their seats. Others stood with arms folded, but none had left. Their presence was not loud, yet it filled the entire block like an unspoken promise. At 1:30 in the afternoon, a white sedan with the state emblem on its door pulled into the faculty parking lot. Mrs. Alvarez noticed it first and stepped into the hallway. 2 Child Protective Services caseworkers exited the vehicle, carrying folders and wearing expressions that were calm but focused. Word moved quickly through the administrative office, and within minutes Noah was gently escorted from his classroom once more. As he walked down the hallway, a ripple of whispers followed him. This time, however, he did not lower his head. He kept his back straight. When he reached the counseling office, he saw his mother seated beside Principal Grant. Melissa Bennett looked exhausted, her scrubs slightly wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a hurried knot. Her eyes were red, not from anger, but from shock. When she saw Noah, she stood immediately and wrapped him in a tight embrace. I am so sorry, she whispered into his hair. I did not know it was this bad. Noah felt her arms tremble. For years, she had tried to balance long shifts at the hospital with keeping peace at home. She had believed promises. She had believed explanations. But the bruise on her son's face had shattered those illusions. The caseworkers introduced themselves and spoke in steady, reassuring tones. They explained that their role was safety, not punishment. They asked Noah simple questions, allowing him to answer at his own pace. Melissa listened, tears slipping quietly down. Her cheeks, as detail she had suspected but never confirmed, became impossible to ignore. Outside, Marcus watched the white sedan in the parking lot and understood what it meant. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. This was not victory. It was accountability. One of his brothers stepped closer. "Looks like the system is moving," he said quietly. Marcus nodded. "It moves slower than engines, but it moves." Across the street, Darren Cole's pickup truck appeared at the corner, slowing as it approached the school. He had heard about the caseworkers. Small towns carried news like wind carried dust. He parked half a block away and stepped out, his posture rigid. From where he stood, he could see the line of motorcycles, the leather vests, the men who had refused to disappear. For a long moment he remained still, measuring the situation. He did not walk toward the school doors. He did not approach the bikers. He simply watched. And for the first time, he was the one being observed. Inside the counseling office, Melissa reached for Noah's hand. "You are not going back to that house tonight," she said firmly. "We will stay with my sister until this is sorted out." The caseworkers nodded in agreement. Noah felt something loosen inside his chest, a tight knot that had lived there for months. As he stepped back into the hallway with his mother beside him, he glanced through the front doors one more time. Marcus stood exactly where he had been that morning. When their eyes met briefly through the glass, Marcus gave a small nod. Not triumphant, not dramatic, just steady. The kind of nod that said you were right to speak. And outside under the afternoon sun, 32 motorcycles remained lined up, silent witnesses to a child who had finally been heard. The dismissal bell rang at 3:15 in the afternoon, echoing through Cedar Ridge Elementary like the closing note of a long and fragile performance. Students poured out of classrooms with backpacks slung over their shoulders, voices loud and bright, unaware that something far heavier had shifted inside those walls that day. In the administrative office, Melissa signed temporary safety paperwork provided by Child Protective Services. The caseworkers spoke calmly about next steps, about supervised contact, about documentation and follow-up visits. The words were procedural, careful, grounded in policy. But beneath them was a simple truth. Noah would not be returning to the same house under the same conditions. Outside, Marcus heard the bell and straightened slightly. Around him, the other bikers adjusted their stance but did not move toward their motorcycles yet. They had agreed on one thing that morning. They would remain until Noah walked out that door at the end of the day. The front doors opened slowly. Parents gathered near the curb, some still casting curious glances toward the line of leather vests. Melissa stepped out first, holding Noah's hand. Her face was pale but determined. When the sunlight hit them, a hush seemed to fall over the immediate sidewalk. Noah paused just outside the doorway. For months, he had dreaded the end of every school day, knowing it meant stepping back into a house filled with tension. Today felt different. Today, the air did not press down on his chest. Marcus took one step forward, not crossing into the school grounds, but close enough to be seen clearly. "You did good," he said, his voice steady and low. Noah nodded. His bruise was still visible, dark against his skin, but his eyes were clearer than they had been that rainy afternoon in the garage. Melissa approached Marcus carefully. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. Marcus shook his head once. "Just keep him safe," he replied. "That is thanks enough." Behind them, engines began to rumble one by one as the other bikers prepared to leave. The sound was not aggressive. It was ceremonial, a signal that the watch had been kept. Across the street, Darren Cole remained beside his parked truck. He had not approached the school again. He had not spoken to Melissa. The presence of Child Protective Services and the visible line of witnesses had shifted the balance of power. He understood that any move he made now would be observed, documented, remembered. He climbed into his truck without slamming the door and drove away slowly, disappearing around the corner. Noah watched the truck leave, his grip tightening slightly on his mother's hand. "Is he going to be mad?" he asked quietly. Melissa knelt down in front of him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "What he feels is not your responsibility," she said firmly. "What matters is that you are safe." Marcus observed the exchange with quiet approval. He had seen enough broken homes to know that courage did not always roar. Sometimes it simply stood its ground. As the final school buses pulled away, the line of motorcycles began to move. 32 engines rolled forward in controlled formation, Not racing, not weaving, just traveling down Main Street with steady discipline. Marcus was the last to mount his bike. Before pulling on his helmet, he looked back once more at Noah. "You ever need someone to stand outside again?" he said. "You know where to find me." Noah gave a small smile. This time, it was not forced. It was earned. And as the motorcycles faded into the distance, Cedar Ridge felt different. Not because of noise, not because of fear, but because a child had asked for help and someone had answered. That evening, Cedar Ridge did not return to normal. It shifted. News traveled through diners and barbershops, through checkout lines at the grocery store, and quiet conversations over backyard fences. 32 Hells Angels had stood outside an elementary school, not to threaten, not to intimidate, but to protect a child. In a town that prided itself on order and quiet routine, that image lingered like a question no one could ignore. Marcus rode back to Iron Horse Auto Repair as the sun dipped low behind the grain silos at the edge of town. The air had cooled, carrying the scent of cut grass and distant rain. One by one, the other bikers peeled off toward their own homes, offering nods instead of words. The message had been clear that morning, and it remained clear now. Brotherhood was not only about riding together. It was about standing together. When Marcus shut off his engine outside the shop, the sudden silence felt heavier than the rumble had. He removed his helmet slowly, staring at the empty street. For years, he had worn his patch like a shield against the world. Today, it had been something else entirely. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A message from an unknown number. He considered ignoring it, then opened it. It was from Melissa. "Thank you for today. We are staying at my sister's house. He feels safe." Marcus read the message twice before typing a response. "Glad to hear it. If you need anything, call." He did not add more. He did not overstep. Protection did not mean possession. It meant presence when asked. Across town, Melissa and Noah settled into the spare bedroom at her sister's home. The house smelled of lavender and fresh laundry. Noah sat on the edge of the bed, running his fingers along a quilt patterned with faded blue squares. It was quiet. No slammed doors. No heavy footsteps pacing the hallway. His mother sat beside him, brushing her thumb gently across his bruised cheek. "I should have seen it sooner," she whispered. Noah shook his head. "You work a lot," he said softly. She pulled him into an embrace that lasted longer than usual. "Tomorrow we talk to the caseworker again," she said. "We do this the right way. We do it together." Back at the shop, Marcus leaned against the workbench, lost in thought. He remembered the way Noah had looked up at him that first afternoon, rain dripping from his hood, asking if bikers protected their kids. The question had not been about motorcycles or patches. It had been about whether strength could be kind. A knock sounded at the shop door. Marcus straightened instinctively, hand hovering near the light switch. When he opened it, Principal Grant stood there in a windbreaker, hands tucked into his pockets. "I thought you might still be here," the principal said. Marcus nodded. "Habit." Principal Grant stepped inside, glancing around at the engines and tool racks. "I wanted to tell you that what you did today stayed within the law," he said carefully. "No one can accuse you of misconduct." Marcus met his gaze. "We never planned to break anything," he replied. The principal offered a small, thoughtful nod. Sometimes people forget that presence can be powerful without being destructive. He paused, then added, "The town is talking." Marcus gave a faint half-smile. "They usually do." Principal Grant extended his hand. "For what it is worth, I am glad you showed up." Marcus shook it once, firm and respectful. After the principal left, Marcus locked the shop for the night. As he turned off the final light, he realized something subtle but undeniable had changed. For the first time in a long while, the patch on his back did not feel like a burden from his past. It felt like a promise he had kept. The next morning arrived with a pale sunrise stretching across Cedar Ridge, casting long golden lines over quiet rooftops. Marcus was already awake, standing outside Iron Horse Auto Repair with a cup of black coffee warming his hands. He had not slept much, not because of worry, but because something inside him had shifted. When you step into a child's life, even for a single day, it does not leave you unchanged. His phone vibrated just after 7:30 in the morning. Another message from Melissa. "We meet the caseworker at 10. Darren has been placed on temporary leave pending investigation. Thank you for standing there yesterday." Marcus read the message slowly. Temporary leave. In a town like Cedar Ridge, that meant scrutiny. It meant witnesses. It meant the badge did not make someone untouchable anymore. He typed back one short sentence. You both deserve to feel safe. At her sister's house across town, Noah sat at the kitchen table eating scrambled eggs. The bruise beneath his eye was still visible, but the swelling had gone down slightly. He looked different. Not healed, not carefree, but steadier. His aunt moved around the kitchen quietly, while Melissa reviewed paperwork with tired but determined eyes. We're going to take this one step at a time, she said to Noah. There may be meetings. There may be questions. But you are not in trouble. Noah nodded. Am I going back to school today? He asked. Yes, his mother answered. And this time, you walk in knowing the truth is out. The word stayed with him. The truth is out. Later that morning, when the caseworker arrived, the meeting was calm but serious. Darren had denied intentional harm, claiming disciplinary misunderstandings. However, the documented bruise, the school report, and multiple witness statements had triggered a formal review. Supervised contact was mandated until further notice. Melissa listened carefully, her posture no longer uncertain. For the first time in months, she was not negotiating peace. She was demanding safety. Back at the shop, Marcus heard the low rumble of a motorcycle pulling up outside. It was one of his brothers, Sam Walker, a man with a gray beard and a reputation for blunt honesty. Heard about the leave, Sam said as he removed his helmet. Town is split. Some folks think you crossed a line. Marcus leaned against the shop doorframe. We stood on a sidewalk, he replied. Sam nodded slowly. Sometimes that is enough to shake people. Marcus looked out at Main Street. Change in small towns rarely happened with loud announcements. It happened when someone refused to look away. Around noon, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the street. Noah, holding his mother's hand. They approached the shop cautiously, not out of fear, but out of respect. Marcus stepped forward to meet them. We wanted to say thank you in person, Melissa said, and to tell you the investigation is moving forward. Noah looked up at Marcus, eyes clear. He does not come home anymore, he said quietly. Not right now. Marcus nodded once. Good. Noah hesitated, then asked something that made Marcus pause. Do bikers only protect their own kids? Marcus crouched down so they were face to face again. Kid, he said gently, sometimes you become our own when you ask for help. Noah thought about that. The sun warmed the pavement, and traffic moved normally along Main Street. Life continued, but something invisible had changed. A boundary had been drawn not with fists, but with solidarity. As Melissa and Noah walked back toward their car, Marcus felt the weight of the patch on his back once more. It no longer felt like armor from a rough past. It felt like responsibility. And this story, he knew, was not ending. It was becoming something larger than a single day outside of school. 3 weeks later, the courthouse in Cedar Ridge stood quiet beneath a bright autumn sky. Leaves skittered across the stone steps as people moved in and out with the routine rhythm of small-town justice. Inside courtroom 2, Melissa sat upright beside Noah, her hand wrapped securely around his. The bruise on his cheek had faded completely now, leaving only smooth skin and a memory that no longer controlled him. Across the aisle, Darren Cole sat with his attorney, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed forward. The investigation had concluded. Testimonies from school staff, documented medical evaluations, and Noah's calm but steady statement had formed a clear picture. The judge's voice carried evenly through the chamber as he issued the final order. Protective measures would remain in place. Supervised contact only. Mandatory counseling. Review after 6 months. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. But it was official. And in Cedar Ridge, official mattered. When the hearing ended, Melissa exhaled as though she had been holding her breath for months. Noah looked up at her, searching her face. It is done for now, she said softly. We are safe. Outside the courthouse, parked along the curb but not blocking traffic, stood a familiar row of motorcycles. Not 32 this time, just 6. Marcus had not called for a full presence. He had called for support. Enough to remind a child that he was not alone, but not enough to turn a court day into a spectacle. When Noah stepped through the courthouse doors and saw the bikes gleaming in the sun, his face lit up in a way it never had before. Marcus removed his helmet as they approached. You did the hard part, he said to Noah. You told the truth. Noah nodded, standing taller than he had weeks earlier. I was scared, he admitted. Marcus gave a small, understanding smile. Courage does not mean you are not scared. It means you speak anyway. Melissa stepped forward. The judge made it clear that Darren will have to complete counseling before any review, she said. We are staying with my sister for now. I found a new apartment closer to the hospital. Fresh start. Marcus inclined his head. That is good. New starts matter. One of the other bikers handed Noah a small object wrapped in cloth. When he unfolded it, he found a simple metal keychain shaped like a shield. No club emblem. No intimidating symbol. Just a plain shield. For protection, the biker said quietly. Noah closed his fingers around it. Thank you. The group stood together for a moment in the mild afternoon air. There were no reporters. No flashing cameras. Just a handful of people who had decided that standing quietly could change the course of a life. As Melissa and Noah walked toward their car, Noah paused and turned back one last time. Hey, Marcus, he called out. Marcus looked up. You do protect your kids, Noah said with certainty. Marcus rested his helmet against his hip. Sometimes, he answered, kids choose us first. The motorcycles started one by one, engines rumbling low and steady. They did not roar away. They rolled out in calm formation, blending back into the rhythm of Cedar Ridge. In the weeks that followed, the town spoke less about the motorcycles and more about the outcome. Teachers became more attentive. Neighbors became more aware. And a 9-year-old boy who once walked into a garage with a bruised eye now walked into school each morning with his head high. The patch on Marcus's back still carried history. It still carried weight. But now it carried something else as well. A reminder that strength is not proven by how hard you strike. It is proven by who you stand beside when it matters most. And in Cedar Ridge, everyone knew exactly when it had mattered.